Hi, everybody. Diana here at Heartfelt Creative. Happy Monday. In today's episode of the Quilting Library, I thought, although we're going to do a block, I thought we would talk about a little technique that we use in piecing when we want to make shapes. So there's a couple of ways you can make shapes when you're quilting. You can actually use curves, circles, and rectangles, all that, triangles, all that kind of thing. A lot of folks don't like to work with curves on circles because it's intimidating. It doesn't need to be, and I have a video coming for you all about doing curves. They're really not difficult. It's like anything else. You got to get in there and you got to do it, right? And then you find out, oh, that wasn't so bad. But they do look intimidating to start. So but there's another way that we can make shapes, kind of a curved idea of a shape. And that is with a technique that some of you may know because I use it kind of frequently in some of my blocks and my quilts, and that is the good old snowball. I still, to this day, am not quite sure why they call it a snowball. Maybe because a lot of times you use little white squares to make them so they look like snowballs. I honestly don't know. That's something that I should look up. But snowballs are great. Now today, we're going to do a very simple block. We're just going to do this little flower block. If you did a whole quilt of these, I've seen some and they're beautiful. They're just a whole quilt of nothing but flower blocks that have been snowballed. And they're gorgeous. You can do all of your outer flower part in different colored fabrics, make all of your centers the same if you want, or like a couple of colors. And then of course, all of this little white fabric here becomes your background. You could add not borders, sashing. Gosh, that word didn't want to come out. Sashing between your blocks, or you can just sew them all together. Now, when you sew them all together, you're going to get other shapes because you're going to have another two of these right here. So you're going to get little 4-patch looking type blocks in there. So there's so much you can do. That's what we're going to do today. But I wanted to show you some examples of what, before we get into actually doing the demonstration, some examples of what you can do when you snowball your blocks. Now, can you only snowball square blocks? Absolutely not. You can also snowball your rectangles, and I'm going to show you an example of that here in just a second. So let me flip the camera over. There we go. So the first block I'll show you is, you all have seen this before, little heart blocks. I know I've done these with you before, but so whereas the bottom of my heart is just 2 half square triangles. And this is only a 2-color block, a print and a solid. Now this is actually a color on color print, but it reads as a solid. So you could use that as well. You could use another print in a different color as long as you didn't have the 2 prints competing against one another. You really want your heart to pop out here. So what I would do with this block, if I were going to finish it off or put it in a quilt, is I would put some white stashing strips around it. And that way you would, the whole heart, you wouldn't have the heart just cut off right there. But what I want to show you is that, okay, so the bottom is your 2 half square triangles, but up here at the top, so this is a square, and all I've done on the square is I've snowballed these 2 corners. See, it starts like that once it's sewn. When you flip it and press it, and that's, or some people call these flippy corners as well as snowballing their corners. I like the idea of flippy corner. So, and I'm going to demonstrate how we do this, but with just 2 blocks with some flippy corners and 2 half square triangles, you have a figure of a heart there. And that's how we do a lot of figural type blocks. And what I mean by figural is the block, we've made it into an object, a heart, different things. So let me show you what goes with hearts better than the X's for hugs and kisses. I love these two little blocks. They're so fun to make, and they make such cute little quilts. So on this one, or something like this, you could go heart and X, and make yourself a table runner and just put a border around. Super cute. But on the X, so for making the X, we start out with 4 squares. And this could be more of a print. This is almost a small print reading as a solid again, but it's enough that the little print is white, so it's enough that it stands out. You start out with 4 squares, and then you put a snowball or a flippy corner on 3 of the sides, 1, 2, and 3. So right there, you make 4 of those, and you put them together, and you get an X block. Or if you wanted them on point, they would be pluses or cross blocks. So, and all I've done, I mean, this is super duper simple. This looks kind of complicated. It looks like maybe I've done, oh, wait, did she do maybe a flying geese there? Nope, just squares and flippy corners or snowballs, whatever you want to call them. So that's 2. And then here's another one. I did this with, this was part of a sew along I did last year. And it's, let's see if I can get the whole picture in there. This always hangs in my kitchen at Christmas. Let's see if I want to get the whole thing in there. There we go. So, and this little wall hanging of a stocking. So, all right, rectangle, easy peasy, kind of another rectangle, easy peasy. But how do you get it to look like a stocking? So this is a rectangle with 2 tiny snowballed or flippy corners. Over here, we have a small block and 1 flippy corner. That gives us our shape to make our stocking. So the flippy corner or snowball block is super duper, I won't say critical, that's not the right word, but I want to say it's something that you really want to always think about. Is this a place where a flippy corner will help me out? Will this help me get something into the shape that I wanted? Let me show you another one. Now, this is not my block. This is a block from a quilt that I'm doing from the Fat Quarter shop. But on here, I'll show you. So we have some half square triangles and some solid blocks. And here we have a long rectangular block and a flippy corner on each side. And look how that makes this shape here. And then, of course, right there in our heart. Now, this heart is done a little bit different than this bigger one that I showed you, because this is done as a rectangle with 2 small flippy corners and 1 big flippy corner. Interesting, huh? So you can use this idea on doing your flippy corners for all kinds of things. Here's another one that has some flippy corners. This is another one from the quilt I'm doing from Fat Quarter Shop. This is the Inspiration Block by Lori Holt. And in here, Lori has us doing, on this piece right here, she has us doing a little flippy corner, a little flippy corner, and a big flippy corner. And that gives us that shaping for the top of the sewing machine. Pretty cool, huh? So you can use the flippy corner or the snowball block for lots and lots and lots of ways and things to make different shapes. Now let me set these aside. Let me bring back in the completed block that we're gonna do today. This one is so simple. So you need, if you want to write this down to make your own and practice this idea if you've not done it before, you're going to need 4 6.5-inch squares of some print. You know, I chose the red with the flowers on it because I want it to represent a flower. What I really wanted to do with this one is to do this center in black and have it look like a poppy. If you did all of your flower parts in different reds and all of your centers in black and did a whole quilt with that, it would be the most beautiful poppy quilt you'd ever see. I think it would be stunning. And I want to get black fabric and do that because I can just see it in my mind. And I didn't have any solid black fabric or any black fabric with a print that I thought would look right. So I chose just this fun yellow, bright yellow with these little sunflowers in it. And then this for my background is actually kind of a really light cream color with a white print on top of it. You can maybe see it here a little bit better. This fabric is from a line called Cottage Blue. I'm going to see if I have a larger piece of it and show it to you. Here we go. It's a really beautiful fabric. I'm going to try and get some of this from the bolt. So it's this cream color and it's got this white print on it. Here, I even still have the information. I could give it to you. So it's Cottage Blue, and blue is BLEU, by Robin and Pickens. So I'm just reading this off the label. It's a Moda fabric. The number, the actual stock number for this is 48692. And so it is, I would call this a blender piece that goes with some really other beautiful fabrics from that line. But I think it's perfect to have, if you have, like I do, if you have a whole bucket, I call them buckets, you might call them bins, I don't know. Like I have this whole bucket full of different whites, and it's just a little bucket that I got from IKEA, and I keep all my whites in there, regardless of what line they go with. I keep them all in there. That way I can mix and match and pick all different kinds of things. And this is one that I would like to have in that bucket. So I'm gonna have to try and find that and get it. But on this block that we're going to show today, 4 6.5-inch squares, and then you're going to need 4 2.5-inch squares for the center, and then you're going to need 12 1.5-inch squares, and those become our flippy corners. So let me take the full one out of the way and bring in a completed one. So here is one of the 4 blocks, because you're basically going to make 4 block units and put them together to make your flower block. Super simple. You're going to do 1, 2, 3 corners with your 1.5-inch blocks, and you're going to do the 4th corner with your 2.5-inch block, and then we'll end up getting them all put together to make the flower. So let me bring in my pieces. So there's my 6.5-inch block, and I actually want to give this just a tiny bit of a press again. There we go. Haven't quite gotten that one as pressed as I'd like it. So there's one 6.5-inch block. Now I'm going to place I'm going to have my large 2.5-inch block in my yellow or whatever color you choose for your center right there. And then I'm going to have 1, 2, 3 corners just like that. So to prepare these blocks, what you need to do is get yourself a pencil or a heat erasable marker or a water erasable marker. Even air erasable would work fine with this. And you're just going to make a line with your marking tool from diagonal to diagonal. And you're going to do that on all 4 of these and all 12 of these. Just corner to corner, make myself my line. And you're going to do that to all 12. And then what I do is I stack all of my little 1.5s up, and I stack my 4 center ones up. And then I just take my whole pile and I take all of 4 of my 6.5-inch and I go over to the sewing machine, and then I just get them all sewn at the same time. And then we'll come back and trim and press, and I'll show you how the block comes together. Let me flip the camera around to the sewing machine. I have 3 of the blocks prepared. I did a little prep work, you could say, or pre-sewing. So let's see, we're good. Yep, we can see good. Just wanted to make sure my camera was set up so that you could see it. Okay, see the machine. All righty. So when I get to my sewing machine, what I do is I put one of my center, my 2.5 inch squares, and 3 of my 1.5 inch squares in a little pile with each block. And then I set all my blocks over to my side. I set my blocks here, the ones that I'm working with, and I take one and I just lay it in my corner. And you want it laid in the corner so that your diagonal goes from top to bottom, upper left to bottom right, because we will eventually cut that back part of the corner and flip it. So if I did it like this, where my line went from upper right to bottom left, that's not right. That's not going to give me, if I'm sewn right here, if I flip this way, well, that's not going to give me what I want. That's not going to give me what I want. Now, here's another thought. If you could practice with this and play around with it. What if you flipped all of your corners like this? I'm not sure. No, I don't think you could do that. I was trying to think, could you cut that and make a different shape? But you'd always have a raw edge inside the quilt. So that won't work. I was just curious there. See, that's the fun about quilting and piecing. You can lay your pieces out and give them a try and play with them and see if you can get them to be different things. And now I'm using a 2.5 stitch length. You could do a 2 if you like. I'm just using a regular straight stitch. I'm just using a regular 8012 Microtex needle, and I'm using a white Orifil thread. Any thread will do. Orifil's just my thread of choice. It's a beautiful thread, very, very low lint. So I've got one. I'm going to snip here and snip here. Then I'm going to take just in my next corner over. I'm going to take my next 1.5 inch square, place it in there, put it under my needle. And all you're doing is sewing right down that little line that you've made. Okay, so you don't have to worry about, is it a 1/4 inch, is it an 1/8, whatever. No, you're just sewing directly on the line. Now I'm going to take my last little 1.5 inch square, and I'm going to put it right in this corner here. And I'm just kind of like rotating around the block. Place this in here, and away we go. Okay, so now we have 3 of our corners stitched. One more to go, and this one, of course, is our larger 2.5 inch block, which is going to end up being your center of your flower. We're just going to lay that one there. The same as in regard to how your diagonal line goes. They go the same on all 4 corners. You don't know how many times when I started doing snowball blocks, though, where I would rotate it and sew it in this direction and have to pick it out. That was a lot of years ago, but I used to do that almost all the time. It was very frustrating. I just couldn't seem to lay those down right. All righty. So now we have all 4 corners. We're going to go back over to the main camera. Okay, so now we have all 4 corners sewn on, and your block will look like this. Flip the camera back to the overhead. Now, here's where you're going to need your rotary cutter and your ruler. And your ruler needs to at least have a 1/4 inch mark on it. This one that I use is my favorite. It's from Quilters Select. So all I'm going to do, here's my sewn line right here. Let me get a darker heat erasable pen here and color that in a little bit so you can see it. I'm just coloring over my stitches a little bit. Can you see that better? Not too well. Let's bring the camera down. Still okay. I really want you to see where that is. And since this is heat erasable, I know it's not going to matter. You really can't, I guess that doesn't matter, you're not going to see it, but let me bring it up here. There we go. So there's my sewn line, okay? And all I'm going to do is take my 1/4 inch mark here on my ruler and place it right down that line. Then take my rotary cutter and cut off that outer corner. Now, if you like make dog beds, or you know folks that make dog beds or cat beds and they like to stuff them with soft scraps, save all these tiny corners, save them up in a zippy bag or something, and then take them to your friend or use them. They are great for that. So now I'm just rotating around, doesn't matter what direction I go. Now I'm going to place again my 1/4 inch mark on my ruler right on my sewing line and cut that off. And I'm going to do that on all 4 of my corners. Now, before I cut my last one, I will show you one other thing here. So I've been asked this before, can I just take and flip that up and press it and be done and not cut this? Yes, of course you can. However, just a word of caution, when you do that, remember you have 2 layers of fabric here now, and you're going to end up, when you have 4 blocks coming together, you're going to have 8 pieces of fabric coming together. You're going to get a really thick seam there, and it's going to be very bulky. And I don't think you would like it as much. So just take the time and go ahead and trim off all those corners. So I'll put those in my little scrap bucket. Now, this is what your block is going to look like. Kind of weird looking, isn't it? But you can already see before I flip the pieces out that we've turned our square into, we've basically cut off the corners of our square to make it a shape. And by adding these other colors, when we flip them out, you'll still be able to see the new shape of this block, and it will have now a background attached to it. There we go. All right, so I'm going to bring in the pressing mat, and I'm going to grab my precision conditioning pen for my seams. So the first thing I'm going to do is just go around and set my seams. And see where I had all that dark mark? It's all off now. Okay, and then I'm going to take my conditioning pen, and you don't have to use this. I just really like it because it gives you a really nice flat seam. And the flatter, the better, in my opinion. And I'm just marking down the seam itself on each one of those little flippy corners. And now I'm going to flip that one out. And try not to burn myself, which I have been known to do. And a little clapper on there for a second. Look how lovely and flat the corner is, the seam. And I'm just doing that to all 4 of my corners. And I don't leave my clapper on there for a real long time, just a couple of seconds to get some of that heat out of there and to set that seam in place. Because really, with using the conditioning pen, technically I don't need to use the clapper, but it's kind of a habit of mine now. All righty. And there's our last corner, all pressed. Move my mat back around. There we go. So there's our square that we did. And you're going to do this to all 4 of your 6.5 inch squares. So you're going to get this kind of an odd looking shape, but you can tell now this is going to become something, because this piece is no longer square. You have a square overall, which is what makes it so easy, is that now all you're doing is sewing together more squares. So you're not having to worry about curves and things like that if you're making a piece that is a specific shape. So all I'm going to do now is take mine. I'm trying to get them all in here. Let's see if I can bring the camera up just a little bit more. There, I think that'll help us there. So all I'll do is I'll put 2 together, and I'm going to put them so that my center blocks Now, when you flip everything out, you may have to do a little trim up on your edges. If you do, go ahead and take the time to do that. And then I'm going to place my other two because I want my 4 2.5-inch flippy corners to be right in my center. There, and there's my flower. You can see the shape now. Now, all I would do is sew these two together and these two together, and then fold the sew the 2 blocks or the 2 rows together, just like we do anytime we're putting our blocks together. And now this one actually is a little smaller than this one. I gave you the bigger one. I thought it might be a little easier for you to work with one that turned out a little bit bigger if you're not used to doing flippy corners. But once they're sewn together, there you go. And you have yourself a flower block. And you could sit and cut out, oh gosh, you could cut out a ton of your small ones. So remember, for every 6.5-inch block, you need 3 small 1.5-inch flippy corners and 1 2.5. So divide that out by how many flowers you're going to make, and you have 4 petals per flower. So divide that all out, cut out all your squares, take everything over to your sewing machine and just sew, sew, sew. Let me flip the camera back over now. That would be like doing kind of a chain piecing idea without chain piecing, but you would just take everything over to the sewing machine. You'd sew on all your corners, then you'd come over, trim all your corners, flip all your corners, press all your corners, and then start sewing your flowers together. And I would suggest that you put maybe a 2-inch, well, you could do any size sashing you wanted. I wouldn't go above 3.5. I would probably do more like a 2-inch strip, and then it's going to come down a little bit once it's sewn in, and you'll have a nice space between all of your little flower blocks. So that is the idea around your flippy corner or your snowballed corner, to give yourself the ability to make kind of a rounded looking shape without having to deal with round curves when you sew. But like I said, stay tuned, because I will be doing here in the Quilting Library a whole video on doing curves. And I don't think you'll find them as difficult as they seem. But for now, practice making some flippy corners, because you find it in lots of quilts and lots of quilt blocks. I know I use it a lot when I put my blocks and things together. So give yourself some practice. You could take and make about 3 or 4 of these with a 2-inch strip between each one, and then a little bit of maybe a 2.5-inch border, and then quilt and bind. You'd have a lovely table runner for the summertime. So I hope everyone enjoyed that. I hope that you enjoyed learning about flippy corners or snowballed corners. Until next time, have a great day. Go sew the world beautiful. Bye now.